Ghost of Tsushima encapsulates the beauty and brutality of the Kamakura period to near perfection and showcases the real-life Mongol invasion of Japan in such a satisfyingly cinematic stylization. Throughout my entire 30 to 40 hour playthrough, I was consistently astounded by the sheer beauty of Tsushima, while still being completely baffled by the lackadaisical nature of the protagonist Jin, who at every opportunity would find the least helpful activity to partake in, all while the island of Tsushima was being butchered at the hands of the Mongols. I'm a gamer though, I have no discipline, so if you're going to give me the option to rush through the main story to save the land and people of Tsushima, or find a little spot to sit down and write a poem to unlock a different coloured bandana, or find a little hot spring to sit down and fantasize about food,
when the Mongols are gone, I'm going to stuff myself with shinobu pears.
well then I am sorry, but the people of Tsushima are just going to have to wait. Whichever path you choose to take though, it'll inevitably lead you through a stunningly vibrant open world, letting you utilise the stealthy and gratifyingly visceral blade-to-blade combat as you become the Ghost of Tsushima. So let's talk about these visuals first. Sucker Punch did away with the cluttered HUD and opted for an artistic minimalist approach to help guide the player around the map, and I love it. I'm a huge fan of in-game waypoints that aren't just big blobs of colour slapped all over my screen. I much prefer to use an actual map, climb a ledge that's subtly marked, or use my god-given brain to remember where I've been. We're guided by a gust of wind, which at the time was pretty unique, and we've seen Elden Ring take a leaf out of the same book more recently, and speaking of leaves, developers Sucker Punch went absolutely mental with the leaves in this game. If you start hammering the guided wind, thankfully Jin doesn't suffer from allergies, because not only will it be blowing a bloody gale, your vision might be slightly hindered thanks to the island of Tsushima throwing up leaves all over the place. It looks absolutely stunning though. Considering this was designed for one last hurrah for the PS4, what Sucker Punch achieved visually is pretty phenomenal. There's the odd texture here and there that drops in quality, like the water textures never look that clean for example, but ultimately the world is pretty jaw-dropping at times, and the lighting and particle effects like the blood spatter is some of the best I've ever seen on console. There's the Kurosawa mode that offers a cinematic black and white overlay, but honestly I don't know why anyone would want to deny their eyeballs the pleasure of viewing such a vibrantly stunning world. Even considering the barbaric backdrop of the bloodthirsty Mongol invasion, there's still time for the local wildlife and stunning flora to remind Jin that it's not all doom and gloom.
Lovely day in paradise, isn't it?
Yeah, just like yesterday.
These visuals obviously carried over to the PS5 Director's Cut version of the game, which is what I'm playing, and it has a frame rate mode playing at a checkerboard 4K and a resolution mode playing at a checkerboard 1800p. But honestly, the resolution mode plays at a mostly stable 60 FPS with the odd drop here and there, but still pretty impressive. Like I said, there's a ton of activities to easily get distracted by, some of which reward cosmetics and others that offer more essential gameplay rewards like increased health or more resolve, which is those little yellow circles you can see in the bottom left allowing Jin to heal and perform special attack moves. All of these activities feel unique and thematically tuned to the Kamakura period. So much dedication has been poured into fictionalizing the history and culture of the 13th century, the grandiloquent architecture, the rules behind the samurai code, and even liaising with the local Buddhist monks who of course still believe in a £400 prophet who has the cheek to teach self-discipline. The activities you find aren't exactly breaking new ground mechanically, but they're fun to find and take part in, from hammering 7 buttons in the right order within a second or two to chop through the bamboo strike activities, to finding these cute little foxes that'll lead you on a venture to an Inari shrine, unlocking new charm slots which Jin can wear, adding some pretty handy skill buffs. In fact, come to think of it, Jin interacts with a lot of animals throughout the game. He's a bit of a samurai Dr. Dolittle, chasing these flies yellow birds as it makes its presence known that leads you to hidden locations, the previously mentioned foxes. He loves having a chat with his horse. There's singing crickets which Jin can collect. He can even bow at some wooden signpost with a bow symbol on it, which will draw out some of the local wildlife like fish flapping out of water, crabs skittering around, or frogs jumping all over the place. But Sucker Punch didn't stop there though. Even with the Director's Cut DLC, which not only provides 60 FPS on PS5, a whole new island and a plotline to explore, it also lets players interact with even more bloody animals, saving imprisoned monkeys and playing the flute to lure a cat over to you just so you can stroke it. And all this DLC costs is £15.
£15? To stroke a cat?
I really did enjoy the new DLC, and it sees Jin head off on a new adventure to Iki Island, but I wasn't a fan of the idea to force players to purchase it if they wanted the 60 FPS experience. I thought a free option to play Ghost of Tsushima at 60 FPS should have been made available, and sadly wasn't, but like I said, it's a decent sized DLC with around 4 to 5 hours of a new plotline that's got a much bigger focus on Jin's father, and you can double that time if your plan's 100% the whole island. You can't start the new DLC until you start Act 2 of the main game though, and once you head to Iki Island you can't return to Tsushima until you've completed the main story. Jin's legend status will start afresh on Iki Island, and there's new activities to find like animal sanctuaries and archery challenges. There's the new enemy shamans to take on that'll buff all enemies around them, adding a new dynamic to every combative exchange, and my favourite addition was the new horse charge skill, which costs resolve to execute but grants Jin the ability to line up his enemies and plough through them, making much better use of your horse rather than just a means to get from A to B. The combat is extremely smooth and well balanced. It's definitely the star of the show, and it doesn't get old. A few blended elements of Sekiro and Nioh, with Sekiro for the satisfying parry and block system that, similar to Sekiro once perfected, becomes heavily addictive while trying to strike that balance between risk and reward. There's still your standard block of course, but the reward for a successful parry makes it pretty essential to master. Similarities to Nioh can be found within the stance mechanism, each being unlocked by defeating enough enemy leaders. There's advantages and disadvantages to each stance Jin can have during battle, because certain enemies are weak to certain stances and some can dish out very little damage. There is a difficulty setting to choose from, so players who've been scared off by Sekiro, Nioh or Dark Souls type games are still welcomed by having that option to change the difficulty. Experts of Sekiro and Nioh should definitely play on hard though. Using the bow and arrow is nothing innovative, but it's solid enough, especially when predicting the correct trajectory for a headshot, which has this very satisfying slashing and gong noise when you nail one right through the dome. The red bar is your health and the yellow circles are your resolve. These are used to heal Jin and can be increased as you discover and complete more bamboo strikes. As Jin uses special moves during combat, the resolve depletes, so again it's risk versus reward. Do you go in for the kill, or do you bank your resolve to give you that safety net of health? You can fill the resolve back up during combat by successfully perfect parrying enemy strikes, killing or assassinating enemies, generally just being a gangster samurai basically. The story is pretty decent and loosely based on the actual events as the Mongol army invaded Japan. After the samurai clan battle the Mongolian army and get absolutely dicked, Jin's uncle Lord Shimura is captured and kept prisoner by the Mongol leader Khotun Khan, who's a big old scary bastard that you'll eventually be locking blades with, whether you like it or not.
Are you having a laugh? Have you seen the size of it?
Jin is left on death's door after the initial battle though, and is saved by the character Yuna, who nurses Jin back to health, and then Jin embarks on his quest to save his uncle Shimura and the land of Tsushima while mooching about, kicking off on Mongols, chasing animals and highly visible wind in an attempt to recruit an army good enough to take on Khotun Khan. There's some really good impactful moments with certain characters which had me emotionally invested, and the writing on the whole is pretty good with some decent voice acting. Now, considering the term ghost implies stealth, the stealth is pretty basic. Detection bars highlighting above enemy heads and tall white grass to hide in. The AI is pretty poor. You'll fire an arrow at one guy's head, then anyone who's spotted that murder will run over to the body, confused for a second, then sprint over to where the arrow came from, and obviously by that point you've done one, and this can be repeated until there's a pile of dead bodies lying around the place, and still, after the last man finishes his 3-second search for you, he says, he must have gone now. I felt like the ability to hide bodies and making that more essential would have been nice, easy to implement, and would have added a whole new dimension to the game. The stealth is founded on simple distraction tools like smoke bombs and wind chimes, and the oblivious enemy AI very generously offering their back to me at every opportunity.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did my back hurt your knife?
A little disappointing considering the title of the game implies there'll be a strong emphasis on stealth. The head-on combat more than makes up for it though. The skill tree is pretty deep and well thought out, with the skills being called techniques. There's the 3 main categories of samurai, stances and ghost, and within each category there are subcategories. Some of the techniques are tied to the story, and around halfway you'll unlock the grappling hook, which takes traversing to another level as Jin swings from the various grappling points. It's nothing groundbreaking, but it's a very welcome addition to the basic climbing mechanics. The side quests in Ghost of Tsushima are known as tales and are fairly well done, and as the name suggests, they tell a little interesting story that's really well scripted. There's quite a few to work your way through though, and as a result the actions involved in these tales can become a little stale towards late game, and that's being ultra critical if I'm being honest. There's also these mythic tales which are given to Jin from musicians throughout the map and eventually lead to an amazingly scenic boss fight. These are much more exciting as you search the land, sometimes only with a painted picture of a nearby landmark you must find to start your hunt for the eventual boss. I thought there was a disappointing selection of armour, 11 in total with options to dye, and each armour piece can be upgraded through finding and spending the necessary materials that can be found out in the world. There are headbands that offer little buffs which can be rewarded from quests and completing haiku poem locations, but I felt this crafting and upgrading my gear section of the game could have done with a little more depth. The same can be said about the different katana types, with only a damage stat and Jin's secondary weapon, the Tanto, which has speed and stealth stats. There's sword kits to find, but these are purely cosmetic decorations for your sword, a little too simple in the weapons and armour department for my liking. But those seeking some co-op action have got the Legends mode to sink their teeth into, and this mode is free to owners of the original PS4 version of the game. There's 4 available classes to choose from: Samurai, Hunter, Ronin or Assassin. Players can cooperatively tackle new missions that have a cool Japanese mythology story threading through them, but it should be noted that certain items in Legend are locked behind Jin's single player journey. Ultimately, Ghost of Tsushima was the PS4 console going out with a massive bang, and although the director's cut is the only way to play at 60 FPS, it still stands shoulder to shoulder with some of the greatest PlayStation exclusives ever made. Going off the recent pattern of PlayStation exclusives making their way to PC, it would be stupid not to cash in on Ghost of Tsushima and do the same thing. Until then though, if you've somehow not managed to play Ghost of Tsushima and you own a PS5, the director's cut is more than a worthy investment. Let me know your thoughts though. What do you reckon to the 60 FPS mode being locked behind the director's cut DLC? What do you reckon to The Last of Us 2 pipping Ghost of Tsushima to Game of the Year? I know that pissed a lot of people off. Let me know in the comments and I'll see you in the next one.